would say I believe that Ogden has had a lot of what I would consider community policing. Like, are the cops here, or at least the ones that um, I know, they've spent a lot of time like out in the community. They get out in their police car. I mean, we have some shifts that, you just see them drive by and then they sit, at a place and they just clock people. But we've had several police that I can name by name. They get out of their car, they come in, they talk with everybody, they know people by name. I think the ones that really get to know the community, the benefits I see is that when someone has a problem, they feel absolutely comfortable, like calling them up. They know who to talk to. They don't feel afraid of going to cops. They don't feel afraid of the police. But that they build a real rapport with the police here, and that's good. That they felt like they had someone to go to, that they felt like they had a friend with the police. And so we'd have over the years, we'd have, I'd say, 3 or 4 that officers that this community really got to know. And so to me, that was a real benefit. However, there are some real downsides to that model as well. Would you like to take that?
I mean, like she said again, like I would much rather talk to a cop that I know and I have a personal relationship with, not even a personal, just like I know their name, I know that they're here with good intentions. I'd rather tell them something that happened to me personally to someone like a cop in the community than some stranger who's just trying to get some information out of me. And so that that's what I like. Like when there was cops that would come down to the OCC and play basketball with us. He would talk to us. Wouldn't even talk about like, hey, do you know who's doing this? Do you know? They just talk about school. They'd help us with our schoolwork. Talk to us about sports. But then there's also the downside when you get the cops that are just trying to get some information out of you. They'll just throw a little in there, like, hey, have you heard about this? Do you know who did this? And you're kind of like, I thought we were just trying to hang out and not get interrogated. That's a little. That's the part that a disadvantage, I guess. Yeah.
That can be a really negative about community policing, is when people are going around and asking lots of questions and putting you in tough spots where you don't want to be pitted against your neighbor or your friends, and then it gets sticky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's been like situations where like snitching now is generalized as like one of the worst things you could ever do. It puts not only you in danger if the person finds out, people find out, but your family. So everybody's like, so when the cop is asking you with the room full of people around you, if you know who broke into the house down the street and you have all these people who would turn around and go start telling people that that's just not appropriate. It doesn't make you feel safe. And the cop that you thought you felt safe with is now trying to, it felt like instead of taking it to like a private room, they're trying to blast it in front of the general public. That gets pretty, that's a disadvantage, I would say for sure.
I do think, much like a lot of things in our society, relational and relationships and is valuable. And so I do feel like if you have a relationship, I would say that's one benefit of the school resource officers, is that they get to know the kids, and they get to know them as people. And so I think that is a benefit of that, just because they can have that relationship and be able to know what's going on in the kids' lives, and their struggles that they're facing. But having conversations like these where maybe officers, in neighborhoods are actually hearing what the kids are saying or what the parents are saying. I'm scared for my kid to walk into Dara's with a hoodie on. I think that people, boots on the ground people, my probation officers, they need to hear conversations like that. So we're not living in this oblivious, naive world.
It might be our job to push the community to protect themselves. Like we work together as a collective whole. And I think that's the biggest thing with community policing is not necessarily relying just on us. So putting those people in the community, like Jody and Diego had mentioned, where maybe, you know, you don't have to, it's a community leader, it's empowering them to be able to not just not police their own area, but just more self accountability, and people go to them, and they still go to the police. But I think kind of a mixed bag of that is very important. One of the advantages I would say with community policing is very similar to being an SRO, like Shelly said. I was in a position where the high school, there's 2 SROs and there's 2,000 people. There's a lot of towns in Kansas where 2,000 people, that's a big town in Kansas. Like people don't realize that. That's a lot of people to manage, to talk to make relationships. We had our own little city. I try to make relationships with as many kids as I could, and intentionally did that because I cared. And I would see some progression where kids is like, man, I don't know about this cop. And then at the end of the year, they're texting me and they're telling me stuff like Diego said, they trusted me and I trusted them. And that was a great opportunity. Now, the disadvantages with Jody and Diego saying is very real. So cops in the community was, like Jody said, the opposite, was just sitting in the car, maybe doing traffic, or probably they're arresting somebody. It was never that good conversation. And when in the schools, it was just arresting people. So the prison or school to prison pipeline is a real thing. I remember myself being in positions where I had good relationship with a kid, and then someone would come to me, either it could be an administrator, it could be someone from our department. Hey, could you get some information from this kid you have a good relationship with? That's when it's tough, because now could severs the relationship that I have, or any community officer has, with the public. And now you talk about distrust and things like that. And it's like, man, what is Tyrone really doing? Like, is he saying what's up, or is he just trying to get information? And kids talk just like we talk. And next thing you know, like, hey man, don't talk to him, man. He's not really about us. He working for the boss, man. He's just trying to get information. He doesn't really care about us. And that spreads. And so now you have distrust in the community. So my thought too, growing up in Kansas City, I also had the advantage of going to a wealthy high school, Shawnee Mission North. I went to J.C. Harmon, but then I transferred. The things I saw were vastly different from the school in Wyandotte County. No metal detectors. The cops weren't in the school. What's adding up here? Like, do you really need a lot of police to prevent crime? Because they didn't have police, and then they didn't have a lot of crime. What I'm getting at is just there's other things to think about, I guess, versus just putting a ton of police in a certain neighborhood. I don't know if that necessarily fixes and solves the problem. I think it's more about the intentions behind it, putting the right people in place, getting with those community leaders, and actually having a collective whole where it's not the police are the ones that are making it safe. It's the community and the police coming together as a whole to make the community better.
In affluent areas versus more marginalized areas of a community, community policing is seen and experienced in radically different ways, right? So for instance, you know, if you're in a affluent and or predominantly white neighborhood, community policing is seen as gatekeeping, keeping out danger and protecting the neighborhood. Whereas I think part of what I'm hearing is that even though there are some real advantages to certain types of community policing, in other more marginalized neighborhoods, community policing is actually felt like, well, it can be felt as criminalizing, punishing, and monitoring that neighborhood to protect the broader community, right, from the neighborhood that's being policed. So those are very different, the same model potentially, and radically different ways of seeing and experiencing that.